The reunion, Shadows of the Eternal Lodge. 1. The invitation. It started with a seemingly innocent email. Clara, a 34-year-old urban planner, received an invitation to a high school reunion. The event was scheduled for a remote, rustic lodge in the heart of Oregon's Cascade Mountains, a place Clara hadn't visited in nearly 16 years. She felt hesitant. High school had been complicated for her, not terrible, but not great either. However, the email came with a personal note. It wouldn't be the same without you. Come see what we've built together. Randy had been her old classmate, one of the quieter kids. The tone of the email piqued her curiosity. What could they have possibly built together? 2. The traveler decided to go, driven by a mix of nostalgia and intrigue. The drive up the mountain was beautiful yet unsettling. The trees towered like silent sentinels, and the road twisted endlessly. About an hour from the lodge, Clara's GPS lost signal, leaving her to rely on printed directions. She hadn't realized how remote the lodge was until she saw the last gas station for miles. When she arrived, the lodge was both grand and eerie, perched on a cliffside with a breathtaking view of the forest. The architecture was a blend of rustic wood and modern glass. A group of about 25 people milled around the main hall, their laughter echoing through the high ceilings. Clara, you made it. Randy emerged from the crowd, his grin as warm as she remembered. He looked older but had the same boyish charm. She quickly recognized others: Diane, the cheerleader who had become a life coach, Greg, the band geek turned tech entrepreneur, and Susan, her old debate partner, now a defense attorney. They all seemed thrilled to see her. 3. The Gammoth reunion seemed ordinary at first: drinks, reminiscing, and a slideshow of embarrassing photos. But as the night deepened, Randy stood to make an announcement. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. Before we call it a night, I have a little surprise, something to make this weekend memorable. He clapped his hands, and a server rolled out a covered tray. When the lid was lifted, a strange wooden box sat atop the tray. It looked ancient, carved with intricate symbols. Inside were slips of paper. This, Randy said, is the game. Each of you will draw a slip and follow the instructions. Think of it as a scavenger hunt with a twist. People laughed nervously but played along. Clara's slip read, go to the attic and find the trunk. 4. The trunk. The attic was cold and dusty. Clara's flashlight flickered as she searched. She found the trunk tucked in a corner. It was locked, but the key sat nearby. When she opened it, she found a collection of old photographs, all of them of her classmates, but taken long before high school. They were black and white, grainy, and unsettling. One photo showed Randy as a boy, standing in front of the very same lodge. The date scribbled on the back read 1935. That's impossible, Clara muttered. She returned to the main hall to confront Randy, but he was nowhere to be found. 5. Missing pieces. As the night wore on, people began to notice strange things. Greg swore he saw someone moving in the woods outside. Diane said her phone's gallery was full of photos she hadn't taken. One by one, people started disappearing. At first, everyone assumed they had gone to bed, but their rooms were empty. Clara, Diane, and Susan banded together to search. They found Randy in the basement, staring at a large, elaborate map etched into the stone floor. The map appeared to show the lodge and surrounding forest. Carved into the corners were the same symbols as on the box. What is this? Clara demanded. Randy looked up, his face unreadable. It's a way back, he said cryptically. Before anyone could question him further, the lights went out. 6. The lodge's secrets. In the darkness, they heard whispers. Susan's flashlight revealed strange symbols scrawled on the walls, glowing faintly. Clara remembered the photographs in the attic. She ran back to retrieve them and discovered something horrifying. The faces in the photos had changed. Some were missing entirely, leaving empty spaces where people had once stood. When Clara returned to the basement, Diane was gone. Only Randy and Susan remained. Where is she? Clara yelled. Randy's calm demeanor shattered. You don't understand. This place, it's alive. It's been waiting for us. 4 years. 7. The ritual. Randy revealed that the lodge had a dark history. Built in the 1930s, it had been the site of a cult's ritual. The symbols, the photographs, even the map They were all part of an ancient pact. The reunion wasn't just a nostalgic gathering. It was a reenactment. It needs us to finish what they started, Randy said, his voice trembling. Susan refused to participate, but Randy insisted they had no choice. The lodge wouldn't let them leave. Clara, desperate to escape, suggested destroying the map. 8. Escape or sacrifice. They decided to set fire to the map, hoping it would break the lodge's hold. As they did, the entire building shook, walls groaned, and the floor cracked. The symbols on the walls flared brightly before fading. Randy screamed, clutching his head, and collapsed. Clara and Susan carried him out into the forest. Behind them, the lodge imploded, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. They didn't stop running until they reached the road. 9. Aftermath. When Clara contacted the authorities, they found no trace of the lodge. The site was just an empty clearing. Of the 25 attendees, only Clara, Susan, and Randy were accounted for. Randy was catatonic, muttering about starting over and the cycle. Weeks later, Clara received another email. It was from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "It's not over." Attached was a photo of her, Susan, and Randy, standing in front of the lodge. The date on the back read, 1935-10. The whispering forced Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. Weeks after the lodge incident, she noticed strange occurrences, shadows darting at the edges of her vision, inexplicable whispers when she was alone, and a persistent, cold dread. She reached out to Susan, but her calls went unanswered. Finally, Susan sent a text, "Don't call again. It's better if we don't talk." Desperate for answers, Clara decided to visit Randy, who had been placed in a private psychiatric facility. His once vibrant personality was gone, replaced by a hollow, muttering shell. He sat in a chair by the window, staring at the horizon. "Randy," Clara pleaded, "what does it mean? The photo, the lodge." Randy didn't look at her but muttered, "The forest remembers. It always does." The forgotten history. Clara dug deeper into the lodge's history, visiting archives and libraries across the state. She discovered that the building's original owner, a man named Elias Thorne, had been the leader of an obscure cult known as the Circle of the Eternal Path. Their rituals were meant to manipulate time itself, creating cycles where they could relive specific moments indefinitely. The cult vanished after a fire destroyed the lodge in 1935, or so the records claimed. Yet, photographs of the lodge reappeared sporadically over the decades, each time with different groups of people. Clara began to suspect that the lodge didn't simply exist in one era. It reappeared to draw in new victims. The Silent Town name kept coming up in Clara's research. Elk Hollow, a now abandoned mining town near the lodge's location. Clara drove there, hoping to find answers. The town was a husk of its former self, a collection of rotting wooden structures overtaken by moss and silenced. In the remains of the town hall, Clara found a journal belonging to a former cult member. The entries were chilling. "The ritual is incomplete. Without all participants, the cycle breaks, but the forest will not forgive. We are bound to it, bound to return." Clara's stomach dropped as she read the final line. The missing always return to complete the cycle. The gathering stormed at night. Clara camped near the ruins of the town. She woke to find her campsite surrounded by footprints in the dirt. Panic set in as she realized they weren't hers. She called out, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. When she turned, she saw a figure standing in the distance. It was Susan. Clara rushed to her, but Susan's expression was vacant, her eyes unseeing. "You shouldn't have come back," Susan whispered. "It wants us together, all of us." Before Clara could respond, Susan faded into the mist like a mirage. The final gathering. Clara's phone buzzed in the middle of the night. It was an unknown number. She answered reluctantly. "We're meeting again," a voice said. It was Greg, one of the missing classmates. "It's time to finish it. Come to the lodge." The connection cut off. Clara's first instinct was to ignore it, but a powerful compulsion drove her back to the mountain. When she arrived at the lodge's location, she found it rebuilt, standing as if nothing had happened. The lights were on, and laughter echoed faintly from within. Inside, the remaining classmates were gathered, their faces pale and haunted. Randy was there, standing by the map in the basement. His eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and resignation. "We can't run anymore," Randy said. "It's us, or it's everything." The breaking point. Randy explained that the lodge was a vessel for the ritual, and they were the fuel. If they didn't complete the ritual, the lodge would extend its reach, pulling in more victims over time. The only way to break the cycle was for all survivors to sacrifice themselves willingly. Clara refused. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Greg said. "We're already dead. We've been dead since the first night." As the classmates argued, the lodge began to shift and groan. The walls warped, revealing shadowy figures watching from the edges of the room. The forest seemed to press in, its branches clawing at the windows. The last stand, Clara, and willing to give in, made a desperate plan. She grabbed the map from the basement and ran into the forest, hoping to destroy it once and for all. The others followed, some trying to stop her, others helping her. The forest came alive, branches tangling and twisting to block her path. Clara pushed forward, reaching a clearing where an ancient stone altar stood. She placed the map on the altar and set it ablaze. As the flames consumed the map, the lodge erupted in a deafening roar. The classmates screamed as the ground beneath them began to crumble. The shadowy figures from the lodge appeared, dragging some of them into the earth. The endless echo, and Clara woke. She was lying on the side of the mountain road. The lodge was gone, replaced by an overgrown field. Her classmates were nowhere to be found. Clara staggered to her car and drove away, vowing never to return. Weeks later, she received another email. This time, the subject line read, "The reunion never ends." Attached was a video of the lodge, its lights on, shadows moving inside. A faint voice whispered, "We'll see you soon." Clara deleted the email and threw her laptop into the river. But no matter where she went, she felt the forest watching, waiting, whispering her name. 18. The sleepless watch. Clara tried to rebuild her life, but sleep became a distant memory. Each night, the same nightmare haunted her. She stood before the lodge as shadowy figures beckoned her inside. Every time she resisted, the dream grew darker, the forest more menacing. Unable to endure the torment, Clara sought professional help. Her therapist suggested exposure therapy, encouraging Clara to confront the trauma by revisiting the site. Clara hesitated but eventually agreed, hoping it might sever the lodge's grip on her. 19. Return to the clearing. Clara returned to the mountain, accompanied by her therapist, Dr. Evans, who had insisted on coming. The clearing was, as she remembered, overgrown and unremarkable. Yet, as they stood there, the air grew heavy. Dr. Evans began jotting notes, his calm demeanor faltering. "It feels wrong," he admitted. Then they heard it. Faint laughter carried on the wind. Clara froze. "Starting again," she whispered. 20. The vanishing door. Evans tried to reassure Clara, but his voice was drowned out by a sudden rush of wind. The forest around them shifted, the trees creaking as if alive. Then, in a blink, Dr. Evans was gone. His notebook lay on the ground, pages fluttering. Clara called out for him, but her voice echoed emptily. The clearing now felt smaller, as if the forest were closing in. To 1. The silent village. Fleeing the clearing, Clara stumbled upon something she hadn't seen before, a small village deep in the forest. The buildings were ancient, their wood weathered and blackened. Exploring cautiously, Clara found signs of life: a lit candle, a bowl of fresh water, footprints in the dirt. Yet, no one answered her calls. She entered a chapel at the center of the village and found it filled with carvings identical to the symbols from the lodge. At the altar lay a photograph of her and her classmates, dated 2025.22. The messenger. Clara spent the night in one of the abandoned houses, barricading the doors and windows. At dawn, she found a figure waiting outside. It was a child, no older than 10, with pale skin and unnaturally bright eyes. "You're not supposed to be here yet," the child said. Their voice was calm, but their words chilled Clara to the bone. "Who are you?" Clara demanded. "I'm the messenger. I guide those who resist." The child handed her a piece of paper. On it was a single word: "Choose." To 3. The portfolio paper burned in her hand, revealing an address: 435 Meridian Street, Portland. Clara recognized it as the site of an old historical building. She drove there, hoping for answers. Inside, she found A hidden basement filled with relics, artifacts from the lodge, journals from the cult, and, at the center, a mirror framed in the same carvings. The mirror's surface shimmered unnaturally. Approaching it, Clara saw not her reflection, but the lodge whole and alive. The mirror began to hum, pulling her toward it. To 4. Through the looking glass, Clara resisted. But the pull was too strong. She fell through the mirror and landed inside the lodge. It was exactly as she remembered, but the air was suffocating, and the laughter of her classmates echoed from the walls. Randy appeared, his face gaunt and hollow. "You came back," he said, his voice a mix of relief and sorrow. "It's too late to run now." The floor shifted beneath them, and Clara realized the lodge was alive, feeding on their fear. To 5. The Randy led Clara to a room she hadn't seen before. Its walls covered in names. At the center was a pedestal holding a knife. "It wants a sacrifice," Randy explained. "If we give it one, the cycle ends for us, but it begins for someone else." Clara refused to participate. But the lodge didn't give her a choice. Shadows dragged her to the pedestal. "Choose," a voice commanded, "or life, or theirs." 26. The betrayal. Clara turned to Randy, realizing he had brought her here intentionally. "You knew this would happen," she screamed. "I had no choice," he whispered. "It won't let me leave until someone takes my place." Furious, Clara fought back, grabbing the knife. The lodge trembled, its walls cracking as if in pain. The shadows recoiled momentarily, giving her a chance to escape. To 7. The endless loop. Clara ran through the lodge, searching for an exit, but every door led back to the same room. The shadows whispered her name, growing louder with each step. Desperate, she remembered the fire from before. She grabbed a lantern from the wall and smashed it onto the wooden floor. Flames erupted, consuming the lodge once again. As the fire spread, Clara heard the voices screaming, "It's not over." She closed her eyes, bracing for the end. 28. The survivor. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in her apartment. The lodge was gone, and the whispers had ceased. For the first time in months, the air felt light, but something was wrong. Her reflection in the mirror didn't move when she did. It stared back, smiling faintly. Then it spoke. "See you at the next reunion."